Good afternoon. Thank you for taking time out of your busy days inventing amazing, world-changing stuff here at Google. I'm Max Pappas. I'm in town from the Washington, D.C. office where I'm on the public policy team. There I manage Google's work with think tanks and policy organizations like the American Enterprise Institute, AEI for short, which is one of the oldest and most influential and well-respected think tanks in the country. So today I'm thrilled to bring to Google AEI's president, Dr. Arthur C. Brooks. Arthur Brooks has been president of AEI since 2009, where he's also the Beth and Ravenel Curry Scholar in Free Enterprise. Before joining AEI, Dr. Brooks, who has a PhD and an MPhil from Rand, was a professor at Syracuse, where he taught economics and social entrepreneurship. It's also worth noting that before pursuing his work in public policy, Arthur spent 12 years as a classical musician in the United States and Spain. Dr. Brooks is also a regular contributor to the New York Times, best-selling author of 11 books, and his books include topics from the role of government to economic opportunity, happiness, and the morality of free enterprise. And his latest book is the New York Times bestseller, The Conservative Heart: How to Build a Fair, Happier, and More Prosperous America. He's also published dozens of academic journal articles, and he wrote the textbook Social Entrepreneurship. Today he's going to speak about how to lead a startup life. With that, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Arthur C. Brooks.
Thank you, Max. Thanks a lot. Thanks. I appreciate it. It's great to be here at Google. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Good to see you, and good to see folks who are on the live stream. I actually can't see you, but you can see me, and I know that there are a couple hundred folks that are watching us. Also, later on YouTube, I'm looking forward to having some interaction with these people. People who are watching us later. We have a big commitment to the work that we do in our YouTube channel at AEI. We have a pretty large, for a think tank, a pretty large following in our YouTube channel. So if you like what you're seeing here and what we talk about here, please go subscribe to our YouTube channel at AEI. As you heard from Max, I'm the president of the American Enterprise Institute. That's a think tank in Washington, D.C. It's been around since 1938. We do work on public policy, but what we really try to do in all our work, that all 250 of us in Washington, is to think about old problems in new ways. I mean, as you know, since you're at Google, you know that when you're trying to solve an engineering problem, trying to make a big breakthrough, the way to not solve a problem that you've had for a long time is to simply think harder in the old ways about it. You have to find a new way to think about it. That's why you go out and walk around sometimes, and you've come back and you find, oh, I can think about that in a new way. Now, we don't have engineering problems per se in public policy, but we have old problems that need new solutions. We have problems in policy, we have problems in politics, and everybody seems to think that we don't have solutions to these problems. I want to talk to you in just the next half hour about how to think in a new way about policy and how to think in a new way about politics. Now, what am I not going to do? I'm not going to tell you how you should feel politically. Everybody has their own opinions on politics. I'm not going to tell you what I think about politics. I'm not going to tell you what you should think about politics. I'm going to talk about thinking differently about old problems. Okay. Now, when we talk about thinking differently, I want you to think of a time in your life where you had an experience of suddenly having an epiphany, of thinking in a different way about an old problem, even in your personal life, and how it changed things. I was trying to think about a good example of that, and I did think of one. It was, and I'll give you an example just from my ordinary life, not from my work life at all, of an inflection in my thinking. It was recently, relatively recently, a year or so ago, one of my kids. I have 3 teenage kids, not to tell you my problems, but they were, and one of them, I was having a parent-teacher conference for one of my teenage kids, and it wasn't going very well, which is pretty normal for teenagers. You know, if you don't have kids, you probably will. And it was a grades problem. And so my wife and I, we left, and we were in the car, and we weren't talking, and it was uncomfortable, and we were kind of unhappy. And my wife said, we're thinking about this problem in the wrong way. We need to think about this problem in a totally different way. And I said, like, I'm all ears. How should we think about it? She said, at least we know he's not cheating. So, okay, why do I bring that up? That is a different way of thinking. And in that spirit, I want to find how the problems that we're having in policy toward poverty in America can be seen as an opportunity for renewal for our country. And then I want to talk about how politics, which is really bitter and polarized and divided, is an opportunity for us actually to come together. Right? So this is subversive and pretty radical thinking. It's not how to make problems go away. It's how to think in a new way so that the problems that we have are actually opportunities for the country. That's my job. So let's start with what's actually tearing the country apart with respect to policy. It's the haves and have-nots. It's the polarization with respect to income and opportunity. It's the fact that income inequality, we believe, is higher than it's been in generations. How do we solve that in a way that helps us have greater solidarity as a country? Just thinking about this and trying to actually figure out a way to describe new, or to come up with a new kind of thinking. And I was listening to a friend of mine who was giving a lecture about poverty. Okay, his friend of mine, he's the assistant archbishop in Los Angeles, Catholic archbishop in Los Angeles, and he was actually quoting his great mentor from the Archdiocese of Chicago, a great cardinal, a great Catholic cardinal named Francis George. Okay, and this visionary cardinal was talking to his richest donors about poverty. So he's basically telling them why they should give their money to support poor people in Chicago. And here's what he said. He said, the poor need you to pull them out of poverty. And you need the poor to keep you out of hell. It's like gutsy move, right? With your richest donors. I'm not going to use that to fundraise for my organization, by the way. But why is that an epiphany? Why does that actually lead to a breakthrough thinking? Because I was thinking about it later, and I thought, do we need poor people in our society? I mean, I understand that we want to help poor people, and I understand that we want to have some sort of sense of charity toward poor people. I got it morally. But do we actually need them? To answer that question, here's how I want you to think about it for yourself. Here's the thought experiment that answers that question. There are a lot of poor people right in our midst in Mountain View, California right now. Not very far away from us. I mean, further away certainly than 20 years ago because of the way that the real estate market has worked. But if you go even as far away as San Jose, lots of people who are really at the margins of society, and they're poor. If all of the poor people within 50 miles of where we are right now, really poor, the bottom of the socioeconomic spectrum, if they suddenly disappeared, just like that, would you know? How long would it take you to know that, right? Would you, if you're downtown, would you say, oh, wow, fewer homeless people? Or if you're looking like a policy wonk like I am at the data, would you say, well, policing and welfare services have just gotten cheaper? I don't know, maybe. But would you know it for your life? Would you know it with your friendships? Would you know it in your social life? I bet you wouldn't. Not for a long time. Why is that a problem? Because it's weird historically. It's an unusual thing in America that we actually wouldn't miss poor people. Why? Because poor people are who we are as a country. This is a country that was literally built by poor people. This is a country that was built largely by immigrants who were poor. It's an amazing thing. I don't have to remind you that the quintessential, sort of the iconic image of immigration in this country is Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, right? Well, the Statue of Liberty has a poem at its base it's a pretty bad poem, actually. You had to memorize it when you were in high school if you went to high school in the States, which if you're an immigrant, you didn't. By Emma Lazarus, but there's one line in it. This is a Statue of Liberty, and the first thing that immigrants would see starting in the late 19th century. The poem says, give me your poor. It didn't say, give me your rich people. Don't give me your high-skilled engineering immigrants, although that's good. Give me your poor. Why? Because this is a country that had to be built by the refuse of other countries, of the outsiders from other countries. We were supposed to be a magnet for people from other countries who were basically ambitious riffraff. Here's the amazing thing. If you're born in the United States, you descend from ambitious riffraff, and you're proud of it. It's the only country in the world where we're proud of the fact that our ancestors were poor. And we tell the stories like, oh yeah, my great-grandfather, he came and got nothing. He had nothing. I mean, he was like living on the bus or something. And then my grandfather, he went to high school. My dad, he went to college for the first. This is the story of every American family, right? But it starts off not with my great-grandfather was a duke, you know? That's a European story, man. We're actually kind of embarrassed if your great-grandfather was really, really rich and you're not. You know, something happened along the way, right? So, okay, what does this mean? That this is in the DNA of this country, and yet we've divorced ourselves from any relationship with poor people, even though almost literally, at least in an intergenerational sense, they are us. So what happened? We can't fix that unless we can't figure out how to make poor people necessary in our lives unless we figure out what went wrong, or at least what happened. So sometime between my parents were kids and, you know, all of their friends were poor, and when my kids are kids, we've become a society that's divided on socioeconomic lines, and we don't know each other anymore. When did that happen? And I think I actually know the date when that started to happen, believe it or not. I mean, this is sort of artificial, and bear with me. I think it was April, believe it or not, April 24th, 1964. That's really, really precise. What happened on that date? The answer was the United States, the President of the United States declared the war on poverty, which is a great thing. That day was actually a photo op when President Lyndon Johnson, he went to this little town in Kentucky, in Martin County, Kentucky, a place called Inez, which was really super hard up. It was the heart of coal country, but the mines had closed, and there had been mills, and they had closed, and people were out of work, and it was poor. So he went there with a bunch of reporters. He was a master, by the way, of the photo op. We think that, you know, President Obama and President Trump are really great with the press. Lyndon Johnson, he was the master. And so he went with a bunch of writers from Time magazine and photographers from Life magazine, rest in peace. And they went to this little town in Kentucky, and they went up. Here's the beauty of it. Johnson takes the reporters to a random guy's house. It's a guy named Tom Fletcher, sitting on his porch, his tar paper shack, with like a bunch of kids up on the porch, and he walks up and says, "Tell me your story." His name, Tom Fletcher. So Tom Fletcher, it's a terrible tale. He's a 38-year-old father of 8 who has a first-grade education. He hasn't worked in years, and his kids are malnourished, and he has no hope of finding a job. Okay, that's what Johnson was looking for, because he comes down off the porch, and he's walking away, and he says to the reporters, this is the beauty of it, he's so great. He said, "Today I declare a war on poverty, and our goal is total victory." And you would have cheered, because he was basically saying, look, third world poverty is right here, it's in America. Just look. But there's a solution. We're declaring war, and we're going to win. He gets back to Washington, D.C., and he puts a general in charge of the war on poverty, a great American patriot named Sergeant Shriver, who also created the Peace Corps. And when he was asked what the goal was, Sergeant Shriver said, "Our goal is dignity, not doles." I don't care what your politics are. You're totally down with that. I know it. Not making people dependent, making people have a sense of their own dignity. That's really what we're all about. Isn't that what we want? Okay. So the question is, how did it turn out? That word dignity I want you to have in your head, because what is the essence of a life of dignity? It's not being helped. It's not being a charity case. It's earning your own success. It's having meaning and purpose. It's to be needed. Like I said, I've got a house full of teenage kids, right? They don't always like me, but they need me. And that's the source of dignity for me. That's a source of meaning and purpose in my life. It's the reason that after I leave California, I'm going back to Maryland where I live, and I'm looking forward to that because I want to go where I'm needed. It's really important to me. It's important to you too. It's important to all of us. Now, what happens in society when something has gotten so blinkered in the way that we take care of poverty that we tell generations of people that they're not necessary anymore. We're going to help you, but we don't need you. That's actually what's happening today. I mean, the data are overwhelming. When I was a kid, about 7% of men, able-bodied, working-age men, were out of the workforce. And I grew up in Seattle, a working-class neighborhood in Seattle, and we would see kind of guys, certain guys who would not work, and it would be a pity, and you'd say, that's not right. So what is it today? It's closer to 18% of working-age, able-bodied men aren't in the workforce. That's what happens when we do help, but we don't think seriously about how to make people needed in our society. That's what we need to do in public policy. The solution is not how to help people more, it's how to need people more in public policy. If you want to know what the dysfunction comes from when we don't need people, look at the data on this. This is really incredible. There's a paper, an academic paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences last year, published by 2 economists at Princeton. It's a paper about demography, and most of it is good news. I mean, every group, every age group, every demographic group in society has been getting richer for 100 years, has been dying later, and had better public health for 100 years. Here's the bad news. One group has turned against that trend. From 1999 until today, one group has been dying younger with greater health pathologies than they were before. That group are white men, 45 to 54, without a college education. They are dying younger and younger for 3 reasons. Number one is a 46% increase in cirrhosis of the liver, a 78% increase in suicide, and a 323% increase in drug overdose deaths. These are guys my age, but without a college education. That's an epidemic. It's a problem of despair, which is the inverse of dignity. And the lack of dignity comes from whole generations of people who are not needed. Okay, so what's the solution to all this? To think differently. If you want to solve the problems of poverty, and you want to solve them permanently, and you want to solve them in a way that you would deserve to be treated, don't think about better ways to help poor people. Think about better ways to need poor people. Now, I'm at Google right now. You solve problems. You solve hard problems. If you're a social activist, if you want permanent solutions to greater justice, think about how that one gets solved. Don't think about just how we can make people with high educations and high spending capability more productive, the top 10% of the income distribution. I'm already productive and so are you. I don't need to be any more productive. I'm maxed out, man. Think about how we can bring greater productivity to the bottom third of the population socioeconomically. What are we doing for them to bring them into full citizenship? Because when we make people more productive, they are needed more. Stop thinking about poor people as charity cases. Start thinking of poor people as potentially productive human assets, the same way that we talk about rich people's kids. How do we do that? I don't know. But that's what I'm thinking about these days. And the way to think differently is to move from help to need. Now, before I move on, it's easy, I'm talking a little too much about them, but let's think about you too, about how much it's important for you to be needed. And let's put a real face on it about what happens to people's lives when they're needed. I do a lot of work as president of AEI. When we're doing work in a particular area, I like to talk to the people that we're affecting. Looking at a data set is not sufficient. So fairly recently, I was at a homeless shelter in New York City that has amazing outcomes, because it's all of their outcomes are based on work. They take these guys and they've been in prison and they've been drug addicted and they're homeless and they've abandoned their families, and it's just like the worst situation, the situation you can't really help, and they put them to work, sweeping the streets, and then they have minimum wage jobs and they learn skills and they have amazing outcomes. So people don't go back to prison very often and they don't go back and live on the streets very often. So I want to know what their success is all about, and I'm meeting these guys. And I meet this guy who he went to prison when he was 18 for murder, of all things. But it was a weird thing. You know, he had smoked a lot of dope when he was in junior high and then went to harder drugs, and he was running with a bad crowd. And one thing led to another, and there was a robbery, and somebody got killed, and he went to prison. Okay, he gets out. By the grace of God, 22 years later, he's on parole when he's 40, and he's basically starting his life at 40. And I meet him. I see him 9 months after he's out of prison and off the streets, and he's working in this thing. He sweeps the streets for 3 months, then he gets a job at an exterminator agency. What fancy people call a dead-end job, but is not. It's a job, just like all of our jobs. And I ask him how his life is going, and he says, "I'll show you." And he takes out his iPhone, which is pretty cool, but that's not the secret to happiness. But what he's showing me is he's got an email from his boss, and here's what it says. It says, "Emergency bed bug job, East 65th Street. I need you now." And I said, "So what?" He said, "Look at it again. He just said, 'I need you.' That is the first time in my life anybody has said those words to me." That, my friends, is the source of meaning. You want to make people, you want to bring them into full citizenship, you want to give them happier lives, you want to permanently solve the moral problems of poverty, make people needed. Okay, that's principle number one. Now let's think about, from policy, let's go to politics. So let's get a little rougher here. Max and I live in Washington. Think of it that Max lives in Washington so you don't have to here at Google, and you should be very thankful to Max for doing that. It's fine, but it's probably not where most of you would choose to live, particularly if you're not obsessed with politics. It's very tough, and it's particularly tough right now because of the polarization. You can't go any place or do anything where you're not having a political conversation, and frankly, it's exhausting. And in many cases, it's unpleasant, and you're watching yourself all the time. Why? Because we're in a period of almost unprecedented polarization. The left is the left, and the right is the right, and they don't overlap, and we feel like we've got nothing in common, right? Don't believe it? Go on social media, right? Which I know you all do. You find that it's almost as if we inhabit different planets, or we have different DNA or something, because there's so much separation between these two groups of people. What's the solution that could actually bring us back together? Bring us really back together as Americans? That's what I want to talk about right now. Now, if you're watching the debates that we had in the last presidential campaign, you watched Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump talking to each other, you know that it's unbelievably unpleasant. You know, I was talking to my 14-year-old daughter. I remember having this conversation where I said, don't forget, the things that those people are saying to each other, that's not consistent with our values. So I actually had to apologize as if I were, sitting with her watching Breaking Bad or something. It's a presidential debate, for Pete's sake. We should be proud of this, of the working of democracy. Instead, I'm apologizing for the fact that neither one of these people is saying something that reflects my values. They're saying terrible things to each other, treating each other with contempt. Now, first of all, you have to ask yourself, how do we get in this situation? Because it's deeply suboptimal from a practical standpoint. You all know, because you're normal people walking the earth, that you will never insult anybody into agreement. It's never happened in human history. It's impossible. Look, listen, you moron, I'm going to refute all your facts. And somebody's going to go, hey, he's right, I am a moron. I never thought of it that way. It never happened. Never going to happen, right? It's very impractical to argue the way that we're arguing, because politics is supposed to be the art of persuasion. Nobody's persuaded. But also there's kind of a moral problem with it. I do a lot of these talks for very ideological audiences, sometimes very left-wing audiences, sometimes very right-wing audiences. So, yesterday I was at Cal Berkeley, which is not known as a stalwart right-wing audience, of course. But sometimes I am in these very conservative crowds. I was doing 2 years ago, before the election, I was doing a talk for a Tea Party Patriots rally in New Hampshire. Okay, I do like 175 talks a year, so I get a lot of opportunities to share ideas with people. But this one was really arch conservative people. I mean, three-cornered hats and the whole thing. And I was making a point, and by the way, I mean, we're talking about, the people were talking about tax policy, and I agree, mostly. I mean, I agree. I mean, I'm a free enterprise warrior. I want more capitalism. because I want to lift up people who are poor and I want to make them needed, which means you need the right kind of policies to be sure. But I'm down with this stuff, really a lot. So this is a friendly crowd. And I'm talking to them, and I made one point. I was talking about political divisiveness, and I was talking about political progressives. And here's a point that I made. I said, my friends, I want you to remember that political progressives are not stupid and they're not evil. And I meant that. And this lady raises her hand and she says, actually, I think they're stupid and evil. So, and you know what I thought at that moment?
Did she actually say that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like not mixed company, right? This is people who think alike, and people are empowered when they're in, right? And here's what I was thinking at this moment. This was actually a breakthrough moment for me, because it was funny. I mean, she's trying to be, it was funny, right? But I was, I told you I grew up in Seattle. I grew up in a liberal family in Seattle, which is totally redundant because they're all liberal families in Seattle, right? And when she said that, you know what I thought? She's talking about my family. And I took it personally. It doesn't matter that I actually probably agree with a lot of her politics. I love my family, and it's like they're not super political or anything like that, but they're not Tea Party patriots, for Pete's sake. And when somebody says progressives are stupid and evil, they're talking about my mom and dad. And I resent that, actually. Now, why was that a breakthrough for me? Because actually, let me ask you, here's why. Look, we're all from different places. We all have different backgrounds. We all have different views on politics. How many of you love somebody with whom you disagree politically? Like 100%, come on, it's 100%. We all do. If you want to know the secret to political reconciliation, if you want more solidarity, you have a responsibility to stand up to people on your side because they're insulting your family. That's how you do it. That's courage. And that's the secret of the problem that we're trying to solve in this country. Banding together with people with whom you agree, effectively insulting people with whom you disagree but have a personal relationship is not courageous. It's not even loyal. So how do we do that? How do we do that? How can I can't just say do that because I have to be more specific. I've got to give you some tips on how to get that done. Because you know what? You're going to have an opportunity to do this within the next 24 hours. And you're going to think of this. So let's make it a little more specific, a little more practical. When you think about the problem that we have today in politics, I mentioned a word a little bit earlier, that's contempt. People often say that there's a lot of anger in politics today. It's actually not an anger problem, it's a contempt problem in politics today. Contempt is defined by social psychologists as the conviction of the utter worthlessness of another human being. Right? And that's how Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump talk to each other. That's how their supporters talk to each other. That's how people in the press talk to each other. Look at Twitter. It's the contempt machine, right? Where people talk to each other anonymously, by the way, because when people are not anonymous, they tend to behave better. Never be anonymous if you want to have a happy life and treat other people with more respect. Always give your name. Your handle should have your real name in it, in my view. Again, it's advice, unsolicited advice, I might add. So how do we see contempt manifest all the time? It's how people treat each other in the political sphere as utterly worthless. Now, why does that matter? Anger, simple anger, resolves in reconciliation, just naturally dissipates. Contempt never resolves. When somebody treats you with contempt, blows you up, what an idiot. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You never quite forget it. Remember when you were in a class in college and somebody treated you with contempt and just burned you, right? It gets worse, by the way. There's a guy at the University of Washington. His name is John Gottman. He's a social psychologist. I've never met him, but he's kind of an intellectual hero of mine because he's dedicated his life to marital reconciliation. He has a laboratory where he brings couples together that are on the brink of divorce, and he has all of the best scientific techniques for getting people to not divorce. That's a huge deal. There's no society in history that's successful that has not been based on the idea of successful, intact families. So anybody who keeps families intact, in my view, is a hero. And that's what this guy does. I don't even know him. I'm sure he's a great guy because of what he's doing. And so John Gottman, he has this experiment where he takes couples that are quarreling, maybe going to get divorced, and he puts them in front of the camera, and they have an argument about what they're disagreeing about, whether it's how you raise the kids or about money or whatever. And then he'll watch the tape. His assistants will film it. He'll watch the tape later, and he'll turn the sound to 0, just looking at this thing. And he can predict with 94% accuracy which couples will be divorced within 5 years just by looking for 5 seconds at the tape. So what's he looking at? Max is married, so he wants to know, what's he looking at, right? What's he looking at? And the answer is signs of contempt, most notably eye rolling. Then you say, like, you know, teenage kids, I see like eye rolling all day long. And so they practically fall backwards in their seats. They roll their eyes so hard, right? But that's fine. But you know when it really bugs you is when your coworker does it, or somebody with whom you're having a discussion who owes you respect or at least some civility does it. And worst of all, when somebody you love does it. It's like a physical attack practically. It's bad for you. It's bad when you do it, but I bet you can kind of catch yourself from now on. You're never going to be the same after this talk, let me tell you, right? It's like you're going to go into your next political discussion and you're going to say, ooh, I'm acting with contempt, right? And I'm hurting somebody, and I'm going to have a permanent foe as a result of this unless I fix it, because that's the truth. Contempt is the problem. What's the solution? Okay, now to begin with, it's not your fault. If you treat people with contempt, it's not your fault, because that's the habit. That's what you see even from the President of the United States is contempt. And all of the social media and all of the press, it's all contempt all the time. You can be forgiven for behaving like everybody else, right? It still doesn't make it okay or acceptable to others, but I understand why it happens. It's a habit. So how do you break a habit? Any kind of habit. For years, I made my living, as you heard, as a musician. I was a French horn player. I played in the Barcelona Symphony for a long time. And like everybody in the Barcelona Symphony, I was a smoker. It's so gross, so terrible. It's such a bad habit. It made my mother sad. So I decided I had to quit, right? But how do you quit smoking? The answer is don't just quit smoking. You got to do something instead of smoking. That's the way the brain works, by the way. There's a lot of good neuroscience on habits. And habits can only be broken when you put something in place of the bad habit. So I took up drinking. No, kidding. So the habit of contempt, therefore, can only be broken if you do something instead of contempt. Okay, so catch yourself. You're going to be in a conversation on social media or in person at the dinner table or with a friend or with a colleague or even with a stranger, and before you do something contemptuous, you're going to have to do something else instead of it. What do you do when you feel contempt? Okay? This is a research project for me, by the way, a few months ago. It's like, because I got to be practical about it. I want to break this habit myself, and I want to help you break this habit. So what do we do instead? You know, what's the equivalent of when you want a cigarette going for a walk around the block? What do? I asked everybody. I asked social psychologists, I asked brain scientists, I asked people that I really respect. But here's the best answer that I got from the person that I really respect. One of the people I respect most on the earth is the Dalai Lama. Okay, now, it's a weird truth that I have a relationship with the Dalai Lama because he does stuff with my organization, with AEI. He's come to AEI a bunch of times. I interview him. We made a documentary film together. We've written for the New York Times together. It's the weirdest, most kind of counterintuitive thing ever, but I just love him because he's helpful and he's a good teacher and he's kind, and so I'm always just all ears. Well, a few months ago, we were in India, in Dharamsala, which is in the Himalayan foothills where he has his monastery. And we were making a film and doing some conferences together. And I was thinking about this problem, contempt. What do I do when I feel contempt? So I asked him, I said, Your Holiness, when I feel contempt, what should I do? And he said, practice warm-heartedness. And I said, you got anything else? Because, that sounds sort of soft. But then I thought about it. I thought about the man I was talking to. And for those of you who don't know, the Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of the Tibetan Buddhist people. He has been the Dalai Lama, or he has been identified as the Dalai Lama since he was a kid, and he's been the leader of the Tibetan Buddhist people for many years, for decades. Well, something happened to him fundamentally. He was exiled from Tibet when he was 17 years old by the Chinese government. And he took his people into, or the leaders, the Tibetan people, into exile in India. Now, if he's poor, the Tibetans are poor, it's 6 million people in this vast territory. This is what happens, gone, forgotten. It's done, right? But no, because the Dalai Lama has used over the last 7 decades his position as the world's most respected religious leader to treat the contempt of the people who exiled him with warm-heartedness. And in so doing, he's actually created a worldwide following. What does he say, basically? He has this old saying. The Dalai Lama says that I defeat my enemies when I make them my friends. Because they're no longer my enemies, of course. He told me he actually starts every day praying for the Chinese leaders. Not that they'll give him his homeland back, but they'll live happy and good lives. That, my friends, is warm-heartedness. I don't know if I'm strong enough for that. But when I thought that, here's the point I'm trying to make. It sounds like warm-heartedness is sort of weak, right? It's actually for tough, strong people. Contempt is for people with no discipline. Contempt is for people who have bad habits, people who have mental tics, people who can't control themselves. That's what contempt is for. Warm-heartedness is for disciplined people. It's for people who can control themselves. Contempt is for sissies. Warm-heartedness is for strong people. So, question, how strong are you? Next time you have this opportunity, how are you going to use it? Okay, let me be more specific because I'm still not being helpful enough. How can you turn contempt to warm-heartedness in your own life? I asked that question too. Give me some tips, Your Holiness. I needed some lessons here. And he said, it was very interesting, he said, think of a time when you have done this by accident, when you've turned a conversation around, you made an enemy your friend. Remember that feeling, remember that occasion, and that will be your teacher. So I went back to my little room where I was sleeping, and I thought about it, and I did have an experience where I did this. And I want to tell you about it because it actually, now I remember it all the time, and it's changed my life. I mean, I don't write angry tweets because here's what I think about. And again, my position where people are pretty contemptuous because we're in the middle of public policy and we're Washington, D.C., and sometimes there's controversy and all that. What do I think about? I think about an experience that I had 11 years ago. So before I came to AEI, I've been president for almost 10 years of AEI. Before that, for a decade, I was a college professor. I taught most of that time at Syracuse University, at the Maxwell School of Public Affairs, which is a wonderful public affairs school, and I had a good thing going. I had a happy life. I was working in professorial obscurity, writing my books and articles and teaching my graduate students, and life was sweet, I'm telling you. And then a weird thing happened to me. I wrote a book right after I became a full professor, and so I had tenure, and I was completely protected from ever being fired. I could have killed a guy and not gotten fired because I had tenure, right? And so I thought, how am I going to use this? Well, I'm going to write a book that maybe is more controversial. So I wrote a book about charity. I wrote a book about philanthropy, which was my main area of research. But I asked the question, who actually gives to charity? Who thinks they give to charity but don't? And I looked at the difference between poor people and rich people and religious people and secular people. And I also looked at the difference between conservatives and liberals. And that's, of course, was going to be really controversial. And the book comes out, and it hits the news cycle in just the right way. And my life changed because, as sometimes happens to obscure college professors, my book started selling hundreds of copies a day, right? And my life just changed overnight. I went from obscure college professor to being on the radio and on the television just within days. It was crazy because I was getting all this feedback from people. I was not ready for this, right? I mean, my wife was like, you got to get a better haircut. You're on TV all the time. And stuff like that. It's like there was different times for me, obviously. And 11 years, a lot has happened in 11 years. And here's the weirdest part. I was getting letters and mostly emails from people I'd never met. Because when you have a book that's really selling a lot, people will write to you and tell you their opinions even though they don't know you. I love your book. I hate your book, whatever. So I get an email from a guy 2 weeks after the book comes out. I'm just sitting at my desk, my office in Syracuse, and an email pops up, ding. Dear Professor Brooks, you are a right-wing fraud. That's not a great way to start an email, by the way. That's not very, inviting. But I keep reading because I'm game, I'm a good sport. And the first thing I notice is this email is like 5,000 words long. It's gonna take me 20 minutes to read this email. But I'm reading through it, I'm prowling through it. Here's the second thing I noticed. Every single point in my book is being refuted by this guy. It's a guy from Texas, right? I mean, in the most vitriolic terms, in detail. The insults are detailed. Like, the columns in table 3.1, they're reversed, you moron. Stuff like that, where it's like, wow. And every piece of data, every conclusion, every paragraph, detailed. And you know what I was thinking the whole time I was reading this email? That kept coming to me over and over again. He read my book, right? Because nobody ever read my books. I couldn't believe this guy had read my book. And I was just filled with gratitude because it had never happened to me before. I mean, it was like my life was changing, and it's because people were reading my stuff. So I thought to myself, I think I'm going to tell him what's on my heart right now. So I wrote back to him, dear so-and-so, I know you think I'm terrible, and you think my book is terrible, but it took me 2 years to write that thing, and I put my whole heart into it, and you read every word. I am so grateful to you for that. Thank you. Send. and then I waited because I was thinking, I wonder if this guy will actually write back to me, right? And sure enough, 15 minutes later, ding, I'm working on a data set or something, and I look up, and this email has come in. I open it up. Dear Professor Brooks, next time you're in Dallas, if you want to get some dinner, give me a call. I defeat my enemies when I make them my friends, remember? This guy went from wanting me dead to wanting to buy me dinner in the matter of just like that, almost the blink of an eye. Why? Because I accidentally treated him with warm-heartedness in response to his contempt. It was a case study of the Dalai Lama's principle that I learned only some years later. Okay, now, that's what I think of. And you have something that you've done too. Look, I'm not so virtuous. I was just, being honest at this one particular moment, a little bit vulnerable, and look what happened. You can think of these things too. That's your case study. That's your teacher. That's your guide. That's what you need to think of. What was the key ingredient in that thing that just happened, by the way? Let me home in a little bit more on it. It was gratitude. Gratitude is the contempt killer. If you can remember to be grateful for the things that you really should be grateful for, because, think of all that we should be grateful for. Think where we are. It's a beautiful day. We're in Mountain View. You're working at Google. There's a lot to be grateful for, right? Remembering gratitude will kill contempt. There's a wonderful principle of this in this. There's a book that your parents probably read called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Go get it. It was a big bestseller in the 30s. Go get it. It's a beautiful book. It sounds like it's how to bend people to your will, but it's not. It's actually a guide to courageous, ethical living where you treat others with respect. Very beautiful book. And in the book, Dale Carnegie was this early self-improvement writer, and he's traveling around America to find the most successful people and find their secrets. And so he gets to New York City, and he goes to Broadway to see a magician named Howard Thurston. Right? Howard Thurston was the most famous magician of his age. He was a celebrated guy. For 40 years, he'd been doing the same tricks night after night after night on Broadway. Okay? And so Dale Carnegie goes to see Howard Thurston to find out why he's so great. Now, the tricks are all really conventional. It's rabbits out of hats and card tricks and all this stuff. But he figured out that what was really going on was Howard Thurston's relationship to his audience. He would tell a joke, and the people would laugh, and he would laugh too. And he was super into it, like it was the first night. Now, he'd been doing this for 40 years, same tricks, 40 years. That was the secret. First night, same spirit every night. So he goes back to Howard Thurston's dressing room afterwards and said, Mr. Thurston, I understand now why you're so popular. You made it look like the first night. How did you do that? I said, it's very simple. Every night before I go out, I'm in my dressing room, I say the same thing to myself. I am truly grateful for the people in those seats who make it possible for me to do something that I love. Now, that's pretty important. That's now what I say. because I get to do that for a living too. I get to do something that I love. I get to talk to you about truth. Truth that brings solidarity and brotherhood and love to other people. This is my job. What an amazing thing. I'm so grateful to you that I get to do it. That gratitude, of course, kills any contempt when you display it while you're talking to somebody else about politics. Why should you? Why should you be grateful at that moment? Because you're living in a free country where because you have a difference of opinion, nobody's going to come and knock on your door at night and haul you off. That is historically unprecedented. God bless America, that even if we display contempt, we're not going to get arrested for it. That's something that we should be grateful for. Furthermore, if you join me in believing that we should not be living in a one-party state, that by construction means you feel grateful to people who disagree with you, who are not from your party. You should be grateful, and you should express that gratitude for people who are on the other side of the competition of ideas. Remember that and prosper from that. Okay, sum it up. I've tried to give you 2 new ideas. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what my politics are. If you want to have policies that help people more, don't think about helping, think about needing them. If you want to put that into practice to try to solve political polarization and contempt, remember that you actually need people with whom you disagree. That's how we put these things together. If you do these 2 things today, you'll be thinking differently about your work and about your life and about your relationships, and money back guarantee you're going to be happier before you go to bed tonight. These are tips to better living, and they're tips to making other people live better as well. I'm really grateful for this. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk to you, as I just mentioned a second ago. And I would love to hear how this works for you. So give me feedback. Spread the ideas around. Write me an email at arthur.brooks@aei.org. If it works for you, I want to hear about it, and I want to share that with others as well. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. And
Thanks, Max.
if there are any questions, we have time for maybe 1 or 2 quick questions. I'll pass the mic.
I was wondering if you think that there's something fundamental to human dignity and human flourishing that's tied up with human labor, and if so, what that means for us in an economy that's more productive than ever, but in which human labor is increasingly diminishing component.
Yeah, what a wonderful question. What is the inherency of dignity that comes from human labor? I mean, there's really a lot of philosophy on this. I mean, this is the idea of sanctified ordinary work is a very common theme for philosophers and theologians. And what many people have written about this, just throughout the ages, is that when people have a sense of their own self-worth, it comes from meaning and purpose. Meaning and purpose only comes when you are serving others as opposed to being served. This is the paradox of it. You know, when you're feeling lousy about your life, you want other people to serve you more. You want to stop feeling lousy? Go serve other people more. That paradoxical kind of turning of the tables actually is one of the great secrets to happiness. How can you do that on a systematic basis? Is by seeing your work as service to others and making your work into service to others. That's how, no matter what you're doing, whether you're coding or you're building a wall or you're running a think tank, you can get greater joy from it by remembering the people that you are trying to serve, whether it's your coworkers or your clients. That's really hugely important. And this is a robust social psychological finding and a theological finding and a philosophical finding as well. Work brings happiness as long as it is tied to purpose. And purpose comes from serving other people. That's your job, is to figure out how to serve other people more. So what does it mean when people work less? So let's not talk about just service jobs where people have less robust human labor or where people are even cutting down on hours. Let's talk about an economy where fewer and fewer people are needed in the workforce. You've created an almost perfect storm, a formula for unhappiness in doing that. Right? So this is connected to what I've been talking about here, right? We basically say, anytime you say, look, I don't think people should have to take dead-end jobs. You basically said, you're not going to get dignity from work because I've defined dignity out of your work. What an arrogant, terrible thing to say. Who treats their brothers and sisters that way? Everybody should be able to work. Everybody should have dignified work and get dignity from their work. No such thing as a dead-end job. That's critical. But what we're basically doing in our economy, of course, is loading more and more and more of the value on the workforce onto you and onto me. You know, the people who are trying to get more and more and more and more productive in the top 10% of the income distribution. That's what we're actually trying to do, in which case we're basically saying these things have more dignity than other people. What we should be thinking about is finding ways for other people to earn their way. And not just in public policy, in private industry as well. And in doing that, we'll have the formula for passing on the blessings that we take for granted. For you, for me, the one thing for you to take away from what I just said is that meaning comes from work when work provides service, and service is all about other people. How am I serving my fellow men and women more today? I'm going to find a way to do it. On your way to work in the morning, say, I'm going to serve more today. I'm going to find a better way to serve today. And you go home happier with a better appetite for dinner. Thank you for that wonderful question. Yeah.
How do you incentivize the private sector to need the poor, especially if it's less financially viable than, say, serving the top 10%?
Yeah, I'm asking the private sector to be more creative in doing that, because I think that we're passing up all sorts of opportunities. And here's how I'd like to ask you to think about it. As an historic matter, every prosperous and successful society has made a major inflection in its prosperity on the basis of energy, of an energy source, right? And sometimes it's like finding oil. But usually energy sources are tied up in human ingenuity. So the United States had a major inflection of prosperity, of productivity, when we figured out that universal education is a really good thing. Universal public education is a great thing. It's a huge public good. It unlocked massive amounts of human energy and turned America into a really great country. It wasn't that long ago, by the way. It was like, you know, in the late part of the 19th century is when this started to happen. It went along with the Industrial Revolution, but it unlocked the human capital revolution in this country. Okay, energy sources are a really big deal. What we need to do to be more creative about, in the idea part of the private sector in particular, like, I mean, we can talk about manufacturing if you want, but basically, look, this is Google. This is the idea part of the world. And I'm in the American Enterprise Institute, which is an idea factory as well, is finding better ways to unlock the next wave of human potential. The most productive areas of human potential are going to be where it's currently lying fallow, not where it's already at its highest degree of utilization, right? I mean, you've all heard the old axiom that if you want to get something done, go to a busy person. That is true as far as it goes. But if you want an army of people who are going to do new things, you have to find people who have free time. And if you want to find ways to radically inflect productivity in this country, you have to find the places where we're simply not asking people to put their oar in the water enough and find ways to help them get that done. What is Google doing to enhance the productivity and the productive capacity of people who are currently behind the curtain of how technology can enhance their effectively their intelligence and their productivity? I mean, Google has made me, it's unbelievable what this company has done for me, by the way. I'll tell you what it's done. I mean, it's given me the capacity at my fingertips with just me and devices. It's given me the imagination, creativity, and the effective intelligence far beyond the dreams of Leonardo da Vinci. That's what it's done in just the last few years, right? But why is it that the people we're adding to in this way are the people who need it at the least? And why do we keep finding ways to make people at the top more productive, more creative, more prosperous? Why are we not looking for people who are not at that particular place? That's my challenge to you, my friends. That's what we should be thinking about, not just as social justice warriors, but as people who are trying to be economically savvy, who are looking for the next great post-industrial revolution. That's the answer that we need to come up with, and that's the answer we need to come up with together.
Thank you, Arthur. Thanks for everybody who came. Thanks to everybody who watched online. And thanks for coming to Google.
Thanks, Max. Thanks a lot.